The Michael K. Show right here on 880 ESPN New York. Jake Asman in for Michael, taking you till 3 o'clock. Aaron Glenn said earlier the New York Jets will play their starters on Saturday. How long? To be determined. He would not say, but Justin Fields and company will be out there. For more on the Jets, let's check in with someone who is on SNY before and after every Jets game as a Jets pre- and post-game analyst. Connor Rogers joins us now. Connor, always great to get you on any show I'm doing. Thanks so much for a couple minutes today.
Oh, I appreciate you having me, Jake. Thanks so much.
So let's start with what Glenn announced earlier. Your thoughts on that decision? Are you surprised? And what ultimately do you think will be the plan for the Jets starters on Saturday?
No, I'm not too surprised. I think it kind of falls in line with everything Aaron Glenn, in terms of messaging, has been sending throughout this entire summer, going back even if you want to go to the spring with their OTA period, that he wants his guys to shake the rust off and be a disciplined team, and they're implementing new schemes technically on both sides of the ball, and they care a lot about how detailed their special teams work is with this entire new coaching staff, and they have some new faces in there. So I think when it comes down to it, how much of Justin Fields will you see? Will we see Breece Hall? What does it mean to play the starters? But I think you'll see maybe 2 series, maybe 3 series. I think that number one, they want the offensive line to gel together. It's a really young unit. When I was out at camp, I thought Olu Fashanu looked really, really good. John Simpson's been dealing with a back injury. Their left guard, really the main veteran on this unit. After that, it's a lot of young guys. Armand Membu has not looked out of place this summer. He's kind of settled in nicely, but you want him battle-tested. So, and then on the defensive side of the ball, once again, it's kind of just having everybody get their legs under them, and they have a lot of competitions here as well, Jake. I think that's why. You can't really decide starting spots or at least rotational spots if guys don't play. The preseason's only 3 games. Nobody uses the third game anymore, really. So you got 2 true opportunities besides the joint practices they're going to have with the Giants to let these things play out and see who comes out on top in a lot of areas.
Connor, how difficult is it to evaluate what the preseason means for a player's performance and even practice as well? You guys on SNY last night, you, Bart and Willie, had a great segment just talking about how you evaluate, training camp stats. How do you evaluate not just now training camp stats, but what happens in these actual preseason games?
Yeah, you always need to be careful with what you take away from practice stats and then even into the preseason because, number one, the overall creativity in the preseason, teams won't show their hands too much. They're going to be careful. And I think if you're the Jets staff, you're also telling Justin Fields, hey, it's the preseason. It's okay if you take off and run, but make sure you do not get hit. Either slide, get out of bounds, even if that's 5 yards early, because we know what Justin Fields can do on the ground, Jake. The Jets know. That's why they signed him. They're excited about his ability to create when the play breaks down. But what they've been really dialing in on throughout camp is him getting the ball out. Obviously a drop-back passing game and the different things they can do with that. Even I've seen a little RPO down in the red area during red zone drills. So, and then on defense, you usually keep it very vanilla, especially this scheme under Wilkes and Glenn that wants to be more blitz-heavy than Saleh's scheme. You don't really want to show a lot of your, different blitzing looks throughout the summer as well. So, are you going to have sauce travel with the receiver in the summer? Once again, it's going to be a slower ramp-up period here, but you want these guys to get their legs under them, and I think there is a lot you can learn about somebody's comfort level, right? Whether that's, Fields' comfort level behind the offensive line, what this team – at the end of the day, the run game, right? It's preseason, but if you can move people off the line of scrimmage, whether it's on a dirt field, whether it's out in the street, or whether it's under the lights in the preseason, then you can move people off the line of scrimmage in a regular season game. So I think that's what Glenn is kind of chomping at to see a little bit from this unit, a little toughness and nastiness that they've been missing.
Connor Rogers, SNY Jets analyst, with us here on the Michael K. Show. Jake Asman in for Michael. As far as what Bart Scott was saying to you on SNY last night, I played some of the comments earlier in the show. He said that he would love to see the Jets offense kind of channel the 2019 Ravens and be that style of offense. Is that realistic, though, Connor? What are your legitimate expectations for what Justin Fields could do in this Jets offense in the regular season?
Yeah, I think it's not out of the range of outcomes that they're, maybe not leading the league in rushing attempts because you have some teams that'll just be controlling more games than the Jets that have the opportunity to run the ball in the entirety of the fourth quarter or the second half. But in terms of, when the game is still close and early in games, this team should be right up there in terms of run rate. And then how you utilize your rushing ability to open up the pass game for Fields, whether that's creating more spacing, obviously cutting the field in half on rollouts, and then the fact that, when you could roll out, you also have the option to run as the quarterback. And, I look at this offense, and I think that, yes, they should be extremely run-heavy. They're built for it on the offensive line. They're going to need a healthy Mason Taylor, though, to accomplish that as well. He is a very important piece for the line of scrimmage of this team, not just as a pass catcher, but as a blocker as well. And then, of course, the ability to kind of take some shots down the field, which was, I think, a big disappointment for everybody, Jake, during the Aaron Rodgers era, whether it was the offensive line didn't give him enough time or Aaron really didn't have the movement skills anymore to extend plays and willing to take those shots. They want to get Garrett Wilson working down the field. I think you have to be patient with a rookie in Arian Smith, or that's his specialty, but I think the snap count, they'll be a little careful with him right out of the gate as well. So can you be that, team that with your run game, you give yourself advantageous situations on second and third downs and then take your shots under center off of play action, which is something that was missing entirely from the playbook the last year or two.
We're talking with Connor Rogers here on the Michael K. Show. Jake Asman in for Michael. You brought up the wide receiver situation and Garrett Wilson. We know what he is. But outside of that, Connor, I've had concerns for months about this wide receiver room. I know Xavier Gibson is banged up, but it's not like he's been a prolific pass catcher in the league so far. What's your level of concern on just Justin Fields having enough true weapons to rely on when the games actually count?
Honestly, pretty high. This is one that I don't shy away from. There's been nothing to kind of alleviate those concerns that you were mentioning that you've had for a while. I think that, you have Garrett Wilson, right, and we've seen defenses be able to take away number one targets by allocating a lot of attention to them. I think Mason Taylor will be a really nice starting NFL tight end, but you're not just betting the house on him as a rookie, especially while he's dealing with this high ankle. They're going to throw the ball to Breece Hall a lot. It's not just chatter. It's not just words. I know Glenn has been open about it. They want to throw the ball to Breece Hall a lot, whether that is out of the backfield, whether that is out of the slot, basically everywhere. But you asked the question about wide receiver, and right now, you have a veteran in Josh Reynolds that's going to be out there. You have a veteran in Tyler Johnson that I think is quietly an underrated player. You'd probably prefer him as the number 3 or 4 on the roster of a team that has a high-end number 1 and number 2. The Jets only have a high-end number 1 right now. And then once again, they want to develop Arian Smith, but I don't even know if it's fair to ask Arian Smith to be that vertical stretch number 3 in September. Maybe that's something he's ready for, hopefully beyond that. So I would say my two biggest concerns with the Jets going into the season that I don't know if they're just going to magically get better is who is the number 2 and number 3 wide receiver, and are they good enough to help this offense? And then who is the number 2 and 3 defensive tackle after Quinnen Williams? And if you deal with an injury to Garrett Wilson or Quinnen Williams on either side of the ball, you're in really big trouble in those two key areas of the game.
You do the draft as well as anyone out there for NBC, and you cover it, of course, on Badlands, which is the great Jets podcast that every Jet fan should subscribe to on Patreon. I'm curious, when you were scouting Malachi Corley, what was your report on him, and just your thoughts on the fact that now we're on a second coaching staff, and it feels like there's still no role for Malachi Corley, who was the first pick of the third round 2 seasons ago.
Yeah, he was a gadget player. Now, he was kind of the, luxury brand of a gadget player. There was a lot of reasons to like Malachi Corley with manufactured touches and getting the ball in his hands, and if he could ever develop into anything more. I think that Jets regime valued him a lot more, not only than me, but probably the consensus of the draft community. I know there was a quote out there that they thought he was a top 5 wide receiver in that draft class. I can't say I aligned with that. We saw all the texts about Malachi Corley no matter what. They traded up to get him. So this was somebody that they had really high hopes for. And honestly, after a throwaway rookie season, that, the most memorable moment is one that everybody would love to forget, actually, of, throwing the ball away before scoring a touchdown on a reverse. It just there hasn't translated to success, really throughout any of this offseason into training camp. And, Corley, whether he's been banged up or he just hasn't produced, he doesn't get really a look with the ones up for obvious reasons. He's a guy that his best work in college was off of screens and those manufactured touches because he's so good with the ball in his hands. To be honest with you, Jake, where I look at him and go, if I want to keep him on the roster, and I know the Jets are very crowded in this area, and he hasn't done enough to warrant special teams roles, which is another issue, I would move him to running back. Basically what happened with Cordarrelle Patterson a couple years ago, or many years ago now, where Patterson, he turned out to be a really good pass-catching back, similar body type, that muscled-up, tackle-breaking body type. I think that's Corley's best chance to have an NFL career. But I'll just say this. I don't think he's making the 53-man roster for the Jets.
I'm right there with you. Connor Rogers from SNY, Jets pre- and post-game analyst with us here. Finally, Connor, you're a huge Met fan. I don't know how many people out there besides Met fans know that you're the host of SNY's The Mets Pod. So what is the level of concern for your Mets right now?
Pretty high, honestly. And, there's things that I don't think will sustain, right? Things that'll go on forever. I just think Pete Alonso, Francisco Lindor, and Juan Soto are too good that at some point all three will get going together this season, something that hasn't happened yet. It feels like two of the three or one of the three are going while the other two or other one, it just has nothing going. I don't really think that's going to go on forever. Now, hitting with runners in scoring position we're too deep into the season to say, it's just magically going to get better. But the big thing is the starting pitching typically just does not go deep enough into games. It's burnt out the bullpen. They have all these bullpen reinforcements right now that will help. But I think the question with the Mets is a lot of people are panicking and going, will they even make the playoffs? I still think this team makes the playoffs, but I think that's not meeting expectations. This team's hopes was, hey, get back to the championship series and give presumably the Dodgers, although I think the National League is loaded, that it could be anybody in that series, a real run where you got a shot at the World Series. And that could, it's hard to project the Mets that way right now. So unless if Kodai Senga magically finds it and is giving them 6 innings again, and the big three at the top all get going at once, it feels like things aren't going to magically get better for this team right now.
Connor, always great to get you on. Thanks so much for a couple minutes of your time today. Always appreciate it.
Jake, you're the best, man. Thanks for having me.
No Michael K, if you haven't figured that out. Jake Asman in for Michael. He'll be back with us tomorrow. 800-919-3776 is the number. Let's talk some football, shall we? Aaron Glenn said earlier that the plan for Saturday when the Jets take on the Packers is for the starters to play. This was AG earlier.
We're playing. I can't tell you how much the guys are going to play. It's going to factor about how the game goes, but we're playing.
And the reason,
because I want to play. That's the reason.
It's important at this point for Justin and these guys.
I want our guys to play. That's the reason.
If the Jets did not play their starters, it'd be hypocritical to how they've had training camp. Glenn wants a physical camp. He's trying to change the culture. They were a soft team last year. It was a country club environment under Robert Saleh. The players have openly spoke about the fact that this camp's been harder. They've been coached harder. Garrett Wilson said it is the hardest he's been coached since he was in college. AVT said it's the first time he's had a coach that holds him accountable. I'm not trying to pile on the previous regime, but if Aaron Glenn did not play his guys, it'd be contradicting what he has done in camp so far. The Jets should play their starters. No one's saying Justin Fields needs to go out there, run around, take hits. You got to be smart. Don't run out of the pocket. If you do go out of bounds, slide. It's the preseason. Take care of yourself. That should be the goal. But football players need to play football. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think specifically in the case of the Jets, after how soft they were in particular last year, and how many just new pieces there are on offense, new system, it makes sense to play. I don't need to see Sauce Gardner playing into the second quarter. 1 drive for the starting defense, 2 drives, that's fine. See, the Jet defense has 8 of its 11 starters back, and now Quinnen Williams is banged up. He's not going to play, of course. But there's some continuity there from the playing standpoint, but it's still a new system for them. So if you want them to get a couple series, that's fine. I think the Jet-Giant preseason game next Saturday, and shameless plug, I'm doing a great event at T-Squared Social for that one, for anyone out there who wants to come. We might have the ESPN New York promo team there, too, by the way. But that is the game, I think, both the Jets and the Giants are going to play the most starters. Now, as far as the Giants, I'm checking in on this. Dable has not said publicly what the plan is. It doesn't sound like the starters are going to play, at least in this first one. That's at least what I'm hearing. We know that Jackson Dart will play, but I don't think you're going to see Russell Wilson and the Giants starting offense out there against the Bills on Saturday. I'd be surprised. I think the Giants should play their starters as well. Once again, within reason. No one's saying we need to see Russell Wilson and Malik Neighbors out there in the second or third quarter of preseason games, especially the first one. But I think the Giants, it is on them to give themselves the best possible path to not bury themselves early with how daunting the schedule is. And I think the way you do that is if you catch teams off guard, if you're more ready to play actual football than the team you're playing. No one's going to dispute that talent-wise, you look at the Giants' first game, they're not as good as the Commanders. But can they be better in a one-game scenario? Can they go out there and stick it to the Commanders, who maybe are feeling themselves after going to the NFC Championship game last year? Can you steal a game early? Like, can the Giants, their first two games, at the Commies, at the Cowboys, can you steal one of them? Then you come home. Chiefs, Chargers. Doesn't feel like you're going to win that Chiefs game, but you know what? The Chargers have to come west to east. Like, you can't bury yourselves early if you're the Giants and Brian Dable when your job is on the line. You can't do it. And if you look at what happened to the Giants last year, they lost 28-6 to the Vikings. They didn't play their starters in the preseason. 2 years ago, with all the excitement coming off the surprise playoff run with Daniel Jones, year one of Dable and Shane, they lost 40-0 to the Cowboys in 2023. The Giants have nothing to lose. Nobody thinks they're going to be any good. Roll the dice and try and gain a competitive edge by being ready to play at the start of the year. I think both teams should be playing their starters. I think logically it makes sense when you're the underdog. You need every edge. In Brian Dable's first year, the Giants got out to a 6-1 start. He played his starters in the 2022 preseason opener that year. He did. He played them. Dable did not play the starters in the 23 or last year's preseason opener, and I just told you what happened in week one the last 2 years. And every Giant fan didn't need me to tell them that. They remember. I'd play the starters. To me, it makes sense. Now, how much do we see of the Jet starters? I don't think it's going to be a ton, but I think it makes sense for them. And I think if the Giants aren't going to do it on Saturday, I think it's a mistake. I think they should. We'll see Jackson Dart. That will be exciting. How much is he going to play, though? Brian Dable, who joined DNR, that was Dave and Ronan at Giant Camp yesterday. They asked Dable, how much are we going to see Dart play in the preseason?
He's going to play. How much, we'll talk about that week to week. He's going to play. Quarterbacks need to play. He needs to feel like he can get hit, playing the game. It's a very basic systems that you're going against, but it'll be good for him to, again, get timing down, play with some different guys, but he'll play quite a bit. Reps.
And don't go crazy over preseason stats unless it fits your narrative. Like, for example, if Jackson Dart stinks, if you're a Giant fan, you have to say, that's preseason, it doesn't matter. But if Jackson Dart is awesome, you have to say he's going to be great. That's how preseason football works, right? Whatever fits your narrative. Like, I remember Zach Wilson had a great preseason drive against the Packers a few years ago. I'm like, that's all I needed to see, baby. We got our guy. That's it. But if a guy goes out there and is terrible, well, it's only preseason. But the one thing I won't allow is this. We're not going to shame preseason football, at least on this show that I'm hosting. All right? If you want to watch football, if you enjoy it, enjoy it. The people who are like, preseason, who cares? Plenty of people care. Trust me. You can bet on these games. People care. People care about the UDFA that they think might make the team, and then when they make the team, they never actually play. People seem to care about that this time of year. Don't football shame. All right? Joe Leo, I don't kink shame you. I don't football shame you. We're not going to allow that here. Ray, same thing. You're allowed to celebrate all the preseason football you want. All of it. Now, here's the situation I have, by the way, on Saturday. I need Ray and Joe's advice for this one. Very Rothenberg-like what I'm dealing with here. I have a wedding Saturday night. It's out east. It's in Greenpoint. Shout out to Mike Morano and Emily Fox. Congratulations. I'm a crazy Jet fan. The Jets are playing their starters. I got to watch this game. What's the best way to do it? Just put it on the phone? Do I leave and go somewhere just to watch the starters specifically at the wedding venue and then come back and just have the game on my phone when we're at the table for the actual dinner portion? What's the move? And yes, I'm aware it's preseason football. It's nuts. But I care, especially when the starters like Fields and company are out there. What is the move for the wedding I have Saturday night? Because the Jet preseason game, it can't be at 1. No, it has to be at 8 p.m. because they're in Green Bay taking on the Packers.
Right. Well, I think that when it comes to being at the wedding does go to your favor, right? What are we looking at as the schedule for the wedding?
The ceremony starts at like 3 or something like that, and then the reception is an hour after that, roughly. So let's say 4:35ish.
So you'll be well into the reception by the time the Jets starters see the field.
Yeah, we'll be probably around the dinner portion of the night. There's also an after party, too, but I don't know when that starts.
Yeah,
a very vague invitation. I'm not trying to nitpick wedding invitations here. I'm excited to be there. Woohoo. But what are we doing here? All right. There's no clear-cut time for anything.
They went with a Saturday.
They did.
I mean, preseason football ends up on a Saturday. So
I'm not mad at them for the wedding being on Saturday. It's more so, what do I do so I can ensure that I'm able to watch this game?
I think you got plenty of time to sneak away, put it on the phone, because it's so late into everything else that you're not obligated to be around anything. You just go off into the corner, and 4 other people will follow you because that's what football fans do.
That's right.
And they'll be huddled around the phone to see what Justin Fields does.
We'll be running around making plays. And our Super Bowl dreams, Ray, they'll be back on. Fields looks good, Joe Leo. I might move my win total projection for the Jets from 6 to 7. Maybe even 8. How about that? What would you do, Joe Leo? What should I do? Should I just watch it on the phone and say screw it, or should I get up and leave the proximity so no one knows that I'm leaving a wedding to watch a preseason game?
All depends on how well you know these people.
I know them well. They know me well. They know what I do. They might be listening right now. I don't know if they are or not.
So then if you know them well and they know you well, I don't think you should be obligated to go somewhere else to watch the first couple of minutes of this game. I think you could do the phone at the table situation.
I'm leaning phone at table. The problem is if it's late enough, because I don't have the exact schedule, if we're already at the dinner portion of the night or past the dinner portion of the night, people are on the dance floor, then I think it's actually easier for me to get away with this because I could just sneak out and go on my own. No one's going to know, oh, Jake Asman's not with everyone on the dance floor. No one cares. Not my wedding.
Well, if you're at the dinner portion, I think you're in the clear. If it lines up that way, I think you're in the clear because everyone's eating. No one should care.
All right, so dinner portion, we're watching on the phone. If it's post-dinner and everyone's dancing, doing whatever you do at a wedding, that's the opportunity to go and sneak out and go watch it.
I think that's the fair play.
All right, I think we solved this, gentlemen. Well done. 800-919-3776. Jake Asman in for Michael K. Sauce Gardner was asked for his thoughts on playing in the first preseason game of the year on Saturday.
I love football. I'm obsessed with football, so any chance that I got to play, I'm always going to, love the idea of it. If y'all look, we've been tackling in practice, so I was pretty sure that he was going to want us to be able to tackle another team, so I'm embracing that, and I'm looking forward to it, but I definitely was not surprised. None of us were surprised when he said that.
Makes sense. Once again, that's the camp that Aaron Glenn's running. The risk is there's injuries, so the Jets are banged up right now at some key spots. But it's early, and I think big picture, being ready to play week 1 is worth the potential injury risk. 800-919-3776. Now, I know a lot of people today tuned into Bart and Carlin, and they're like, what's Bart Scott going to say today? And you never got to hear from Bart because he was off. But Bart was on SNY last night. SNY ran a Jets training camp special, and they were talking about Justin Fields at the panel. Bart and Willie Colon, 2 of SNY's Jets analyst. The third SNY Jets analyst, Connor Rogers, he'll actually be joining us coming up in about 15 minutes to talk some Jets. But this was Bart Scott breaking down what he believes the Jet offense with Justin Fields should look like. I'll play you Bart, and then we'll debate, is this actually realistic for the Jets in 2025?
If I'm looking at Justin Fields, I think a recipe for success is to make him the 2019 Baltimore Ravens, where he's going to throw the ball 25 times a game, and they're going to run the ball down people's throat. You want to talk about running back by committee? Well, listen, if I'm going to have 70 or 80 snaps in a game, 40 to 50 of those are going to be runs downhill. We talk about being physical. It's about a brand. It's about a philosophy. Understand that you have a quarterback that's capable of rushing for 1,000 yards. You have 2 backs that I think is capable of rushing for 1,000 yards. This team should lead the league in rushing attempts. It's going to help that defense. It's going to help that offensive line as it continues to it's going to continue to gel, and it's also going to help the play action and plays when that 8th man has come to the box in those rare occasions we can get one-on-one for Garrett Wilson.
So I understand the premise there from Bart, right? Fields, can he be Lamar Jackson light? I don't think, while the Jets have the personnel to be a good running team, I don't know if they have what the Ravens had back in 2019. And also, Fields is not Lamar Jackson. 2019, Lamar Jackson threw 36 touchdowns and had 3,100 passing yards. Fields has never thrown for more than 20 touchdowns in a season. And he's never thrown for 3,000 yards. I think the most he's ever had is in the 2-something. So I don't think we're going to get that. Now, Fields has had 1,000 yards as a rusher before. I think him, Breece Hall, Isaiah Davis, and, of course, Braylon Allen need to all be utilized. I think Fields will be second on the Jets in rushing yards this year. First will be Breece, second Fields. And you could tell me it's either Allen or Isaiah Davis for number 3. I'm very impressed with what I've seen from Isaiah Davis. He was the best player at the camp practice I was at, the green and white scrimmage last Saturday. They're going to run the ball, there's no doubt. I think the better comp, though, that Bart's making is not Lamar in 2019. It's the Philadelphia Eagles and Jalen Hurts in 2021. Before Jalen Hurts was, Super Bowl MVP Jalen Hurts, and he was this established star, his first year as a full-time starter, when they went 9-8 and snuck into the playoffs and lost to Brady and the Bucs in a playoff game, that Eagles offense, they were 25th in passing. But you know what they were in rushing? Number 1. They led the NFL with 2,715 rushing yards. They averaged 159.7 yards per game. Total offense, they were 14th. They had a good defense. I think that's realistic for Fields. Jalen Hurts that year, 3,144 yards. He also led the team with 784 rushing yards. Rookie Devontae Smith had 916 yards. Goddard had 830 receiving yards. Dallas Goedert at the tight end spot. Fields, over the last couple of years, is third in the NFL in passer rating when he targets his tight ends. Assuming Mason Taylor's high ankle sprain's okay, I think he's going to be a solid rookie. I'm not saying he's Sam Laporta. He's not going to be Brock Bowers. I think he's a good player, though. You put him out there with Garrett Wilson, who could play the Devontae Smith role in this comparison. I don't think it's crazy to expect Justin Fields to do what Jalen Hurts did in 2021. Those, to me, are reasonable stats. 14th in total offense, number 1 in rushing. That should be the strategy. Run and run and run some more. Willie Colon, former Jet lineman. He was on SNY with Bart Scott, and this was Willie on what the Fields offense should look like.
Yeah, I'm always a fan when coaches follow the instructions of the ball player, right? Like, to your point, he's not a guy who should be throwing the ball 30, 40 times a game. However, he is a guy, because the way his makeup is, you understand, Ohio State, man, Justin Fields, he hasn't necessarily adapted to this style of quarterback as far as seeing it land and go. He was asked in college to kind of, hold on to the ball, make those big plays, those explosive plays. That's what he was taught. So he really hasn't converted. So if you know that's where he's at right now, in reference to holding on the ball, then you got to start moving the pocket, having design runs with him, doing things where he can see it on the run so he can use that big arm. Asking him to be, to your point, the Jared Goff or the Matthew Stafford, that's just not who he is.
That's Willie Colon, I think, echoing what a lot of Jet fans feel. That should be the plan. The biggest thing the Jets need this year to be any good, beyond the obvious, Fields has got to be competent. But who's coaching Fields? It's not Aaron Glenn. He's not the offensive play caller. It's not. It's Tanner Engstrand, who's never been an NFL play caller. He's called plays in the XFL. He's called plays in college. He comes over from the Lions with Glenn. He was under Ben Johnson as the pass game coordinator. That's the biggest thing for the Jets. Can Tanner Engstrand, who was the pass game coordinator, design an offense that is run, 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 and run some more? Ground and pound, to quote Rex Ryan. Because that's the path here. Fields has to stay healthy. That's, of course, a concern, but I'm not worried about that. Let's go, man. This is Justin Fields' last opportunity to be a starter in the NFL where a job is just handed to him. No team in the league, if he fails with the Jets, is going into next year saying, hey, Justin Fields, you're our guy. The Jets have, maybe almost to a fault, you could argue, handed Fields the job. They gave him the contract that paid him $30 million guaranteed, and they have said, you're the guy, go out and win. Go out and take us there. Tyrod is a legit backup. He's a legit quarterback when he's healthy. We know his health limitations are what they are. He's banged up right now. He's not practicing with a knee injury. But you can make a case Tyrod's better than Fields if he had one game to win. Fields has way higher of a ceiling. So the Jets' strategy has been, let's build him up. Let's say you're the guy. No competition. You're not going to have to worry about you and Russell Wilson going at it and getting your job yanked from you even after you go 4-2 as a starter. You're the guy. But if it doesn't work with the Jets, he's never going to be anyone's guy anymore. It would need to be like a Sam Darnold situation where someone got hurt and he ran with it if he's going to be a starter again. And with Fields, he might literally be able to run with it, pun intended. But the reality is, for a Jet offense that lacks true weapons besides Garrett Wilson on the outside, they need to be able to run the ball effectively. I've been encouraged that every report with the offensive issues the Jets have had at times, it's never been they can't run the ball. I think Breece Hall is in for a big year. I do think they're going to utilize him properly out of the backfield, more in that Christian McCaffrey type role. Contract year for Brees. I like Braylon Allen. I like Isaiah Davis, and I like the Jets' offensive line. If the Jets' offensive line is actually able to play like the talent they have, they won't be as bad as most think. Are they a playoff team? I have doubts on Fields. I do. But they're not going to be one of the worst teams in the league. I've seen mock drafts having the Jets with the number 1 pick. They're not that bad. They're not. They have a former All-Pro on all 3 levels of their defense. They get Jermaine Johnson back. Will McDonald had 10.5 sacks last year. He's in year 3. Jamien Sherwood's 25. They signed him long-term. He's going to be better. Michael Carter's healthy. They have good players on defense. They seemingly have a kicker now in Nick Folk. It's hard to be coached worse than the Jets were last year, especially post-Salah being canned 5 games in. This is not one of the worst teams in the league. They should be competitive. How do they go from competitive to, hey, you win 9 games and sneak in? Like that Eagles team I referenced did in 2021? Justin Fields and Tanner Engstrand have a real offense that maximizes Fields' strength and the personnel the Jets do have. 800-919-3776. Brian in Rockville Center is up next on the K Show with Jake Asman. What's up, Brian?
How are you guys? With this strategy, which is really their only option, it's great on paper, but they're trying to mimic the Eagles. They don't have the Eagles' offensive line. If you go through the offensive line, Olu had half a redshirt year last year. I think he's going to be a great player, but there still might be growing pains in that. Membo's going to be a rookie tackle. He's going to be growing pains with that. AVT has had his injury problems, and I think Joe Tippmann's an average center. So on paper, it's good, but if you have a really good team and the offensive line doesn't take care of business, you're just going to load the box and double cover Garrett. And I just don't think it's a recipe for success. I hope it does. I hope they can turn into that, to have that identity. But I think it's just a lot to ask from the offensive line. I don't think they're as prepared as they're going to need to be for this year.
Brian, appreciate the call. Look, I think the line's better than you give it credit for, but they need to prove it. Olu was good last year before he got hurt. I've heard from people, including our guest coming up in a few minutes, Connor Rogers. Olu's look great at camp. I think John Simpson's a really good left guard. You left him out. Joe Tippmann, I think, is a fine center. AVT, there's a big if he's healthy. When he's healthy, he's one of the best guards in the league, though. And look, you're right. Membo's a rookie, but he was the 7th pick in the draft, and the Jets aren't asking him to learn a new position. He was a right tackle at Missouri. He's a right tackle for them. On paper, it's the most talented O-line the Jets have had in years. You're talking about an offensive line with what? 3 first-round picks on it, a high second-round pick, and a really good free agent signing. If they're healthy, they should be good. Brees healthy, he should be good. Fields open things up for you in that department as well. That's why Saquon has this unbelievable historic year. He's playing with Jalen Hurts. Derrick Henry, unbelievable historic year. Well, it helps when you have Lamar Jackson. So a rushing quarterback could help a rushing attack in general. So I'm more optimistic than most on the Jet O-line, but it's a fair criticism or worry. They got to prove it. That's why the coaching, the offensive staff, it's so important if this team's going to be any good. This guy's been on TV all day. I watched him on SportsCenter and Get Up. He's been making the rounds, and he's kind enough to give us a couple minutes of his time here on our show. Mike Tannenbaum, former GM of both the Jets and the Dolphins, and, of course, everywhere on ESPN, is with us now. Mike, always appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, Jake, how are you?
I'm hanging in, Mike. So I want to start with something that I think you know very well, which is the Micah Parsons situation in Dallas, Trey Hendrickson and his demands for a contract with the Bengals. Whenever there's a star player that wants a new deal, do you think back to all the negotiations you once had with Darrelle Revis' agents and, of course, a certain diner in the central New York area?
Yeah, amongst many others. But, yeah, that certainly comes back for sure. And, look, like your job when you're in the front office is to solve problems. They come in different, shapes, sizes, and, that's just something you have to deal with.
When does the Parsons or Henderson situation get to a point where you would start to be concerned as a GM or a coach, hey, this guy might not be with us for the start of the season?
We're not there yet, but we're not far away. And, Emmitt Smith, going back a number of years, missed a couple games for Dallas. We saw Chris Jones miss the opener for Kansas City. Obviously, we saw Jalen Ramsey get traded from the Jaguars to the Rams. I don't think we're there yet for either one, but 10 days from now, it could get, to that point.
We'll start with the Jets, Mike, as we talk all things locally now. So Justin Fields came out yesterday, and he said that he wants to play in the preseason. He thinks the starters should play in the preseason. What's your philosophy when you were going through it as a GM and now in today's NFL on starters and specifically the starting quarterback going out there and playing in these preseason games?
Yeah, we talked about that this morning. Context is everything. Cincinnati's 1-11 in their last 12 games in September, and you see Zach Taylor saying that, they're going to play Joe Burrow, and something that Joe Burrow wants to do as well. So, every situation is going to be different. Andy Reid plays Patrick Mahomes, and obviously, with the Jets, I think Justin Fields getting out there with the ones, makes a lot of sense.
In the case of Fields, there's been some struggles throwing the ball at practice the last couple of days. How would you as a GM always look at what happens in practice and how that would reflect, if it would reflect at all, on what could be coming in the regular season?
Yeah, look, context is important. You don't know, what's being asked of him or, was the route run correctly. Practice is obviously important, but, you have a new, obviously, coordinator, new quarterback, working with new skill players. So, everything is about making progress and, getting ready for the first week of the season.
What have been your impressions on Aaron Glenn? You were a big part of the reason why he has this job now with the Jets. So your thoughts on his first training camp and what has stood out to you?
Yeah, I think it's exactly what, I've been fortunate to know Aaron going on 30 years. So he's a smart, tough person who loves football and is going to hold people to the same standard that he holds for himself, Jake. And I think his team will play sort of in that vision.
Mike Tannenbaum with us here on the Michael K. Show. Jake Asman in for Michael, talking with, of course, the former GM of both the Jets and the Dolphins. You watch Mike everywhere on ESPN. In the case of Glenn, Mike, to me it's been really refreshing just as a fan, as a Jet fan, just hearing from the players on how they feel like they're being held accountable, that training camp has been a real positive as far as just the physicality that Glenn is trying to instill, and it just feels like the team is totally bought in. Is that the sense you get as well, or is it too early to say that with any first-year coach?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think, when you look at indices of being, well coached, like penalties, end of half scoring, turnovers, I think those will all be markedly improved than what they've been in the past. And, you could look at Detroit where he came from, working with Dan Campbell, and that's sort of how they built Detroit. They stopped losing, and then they got more and more better players, and they are obviously one of the best teams in the league. So I think they're going to have that very similar feel this year.
This is the first time that I've had you on since the Jets were able to lock up Sauce Gardner and Garrett Wilson before camp opened, Mike. What were your thoughts on those deals? Did it make sense for Aaron Glenn and Darren Muji to get those deals done before camp here?
Absolutely. We just talked about, some of the, Hendricksons of the world and the Parsons. The opposite end of the spectrum is to be proactive. And when you have good players who are good people that are going to be there for a while, typically you go sooner rather than later. That turns out to be a good deal. And I'm sure that'll be the case with these two guys.
Mike Tannenbaum with us here, 1050 ESPN New York. In the case of Fields, Mike, how did you feel about him when you evaluated him coming out of Ohio State? And he's now bounced around. This is his third team in 3 years. What are your reasonable expectations for what he could do with this Jets offense?
Yeah, look, I think he'll play well. For whatever reason, it hasn't worked out so far. But, it didn't work out for Baker Mayfield the first few stops or, some other quarterbacks. So, the quarterback development plan isn't always a straight line, but I know football is important to him. He can make all the throws, and I think he'll be a good fit with Tanner Erkstead and what they want to do on offense. So I'm looking forward to watching him play.
Switching to the Giants, they, of course, have Russell Wilson now as their starter. Jameis is behind him. They drafted Jackson Dart, as you know, in the first round. Your thoughts on their outlook, and when do you think, do you think we see Jackson Dart at some point have to start games in the regular season for the Giants?
Yeah, Jake, absolutely. And I know they're happy with him so far. He still has, obviously, a ways to go. But, when we had Mark Sanchez with Jets, we kind of threw him out there from day one, snap one, and never looked back. I think they're going to probably take a little bit of a different tack, which is could certainly work out with Russell Wilson or possibly even Jameis Winston. But I think Jackson Dart has a chance to be really good. I think his athleticism is somewhat, I would say, underrated. And I think so far so good from a Giant perspective. I'm sure he'll play quite a bit, in this upcoming preseason.
Obviously, they signed Jameis Winston before they were able to know whether or not they'd be able to draft a quarterback or even draft, of course, Jackson Dart. But is Jameis Winston now expendable, Mike, or do you think it's best served if Dart's the number 3 quarterback and he just truly gets to sit back and watch the 2 veterans at the start of the year? What would be your approach if you were Joe Schoen?
Yeah, Jake, look, I've been on the record since I feel like Green Bay from the day they drafted him, but I don't know what the downside is to playing Jackson Dart. Give him what he can handle and live with some of the growing pains in September, October, so you can be better in November and December. Look, when you have extra quarterbacks, that's never a bad thing. We've seen Cleveland lose Dylan Gabriel, Kenny Pickett so far. Hopefully those are short-term injuries, but in my mind, you can never have too many quarterbacks. So I don't think they'll just give away Winston, but I would certainly consider playing Dart right away.
How did you know Mark Sanchez was ready to start as a rookie, Mike? Was it something he did in practice? Was it a leadership thing? How did you and Rex decide, hey, we're comfortable going into the year with a rookie quarterback as our starter?
Yeah, I think it was a combination of things. It was Rex Ryan, Brian Schottenheimer, our offensive coordinator, and it was all about, how do we win this game? And that's what's great about football. It's a game of chess played on grass. And, I'm not saying you need Jackson Dart to throw 40 passes because there was a lot of games early on where, Mark Sanchez didn't throw it a lot. We could run the ball. We had a great offensive line, a good defense, and we were able to, fortunately win a whole bunch of games. So I think it's all about having an alignment and, more importantly, a strategy that can be executed with the players you have and figure out the best way to win week to week.
You brought up Shedeur Sanders, so I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about him. What are your thoughts on his opportunity now? He's going to start the Browns' first preseason game, and where he fell in the draft. Is that ultimately a good spot for him to be in Cleveland, as weird as that is to say out loud? Just your thoughts on Shedeur as he's going to get an opportunity here to at least start their first preseason game.
Yeah, Jake, this is a pretty big story. I mean, he has a great opportunity. I just said on the air, just go play well. No pre-snap penalties, no delay games, get rid of the ball. You have good footwork, good fundamentals. And if you play well, you'll get more reps in week 2. And that's really where he should be focused. All that noise that happened in the draft, that's ancient history, Shedeur. Go play well and take advantage of the opportunity. That's what's great about the NFL, right? Brock Purdy goes out there and outplays Trey Lance. Kirk Cousins outplays RG3. That's what you love about our sport. The best players play.